What's up everyone, it's Mad Static, and after 2 years of the PlayStation 5 technically being out, the PlayStation 5 is now realistically out. It's funny because a brand new system is supposed to be marked by new experiences and games, but the PS5 doesn't really have too many of those. Of course you got the big new releases, but everyone just kinda goes back to playing the 50th Call of Duty, or the 500th NBA, or the 5th Grand Theft Auto, which I had to buy for over $50 again, for the third time. Shout out to my brother, whose sole reason for buying a PS5 was to run Fortnite at 120 frames. I can't even say shit though, because one of my first instincts upon getting this brand new expensive PS5 was to drop $70 more on a PS3 game. That's right, I'm talking about Dead Space. I mean The Last of Us. I mean, Jesus Christ, there's a lot of remakes. Demon's Souls. With a Z. This is the 2020 remake of the legendary 2009 release. And I use the word legendary specifically because to most it really was only a legend. You see, Demon's Souls was spiritually succeeded by the more iconic and popular Dark Souls. From there, within the PS4 and Xbox One's lifespan, the developers of the Souls games from Software reached mass recognition and fame, with Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice and most recently Elden Ring. Most of their fans accumulated during this time, but up until 2020, Demon's Souls was stuck on the third PlayStation. No remaster, or Game of the Year edition, or PC port, nothing. The IP rights were held under Sony, who handed the title off to Bluepoint Games so they could freshen it up visually as a launch title and showcase for the sheer power of the brand new, expensive, obnoxiously large PS5. And those visuals definitely paid off, like goddamn! The graphics speak for themselves. It's ironic that with this remake, the first FromSoft Souls game has now become its most technically impressive. And that's not easy, these are some beautiful games, but there is such a substantial emphasis on performance and fidelity here that no other game in the series to this point can live up to, not even Elden Ring, which released 2 years after it. But graphics were the only majorly upgraded part of it. The actual gameplay itself wasn't really fiddled with in order to preserve the original experience. And on that note, gameplay-wise, as old as it is, Demon's Souls still lives up to the rest of its siblings. A true masterpiece in level design and highly demanding but satisfying combat and enemy encounters. Easily the worst Souls game. Nah, I'm just kidding. Well, not easily at least, because Dark Souls 2 is giving it some competition. Again, it's a masterpiece, but I'd call all of these games that, and where with each new release the high points get so big that they make their problems almost irrelevant.
Look at this big ass map!
The fairly humble beginnings of Demon's Souls just feel a bit smaller and less impactful. If it's any consolation though, most of these other games have worse problems covered up by greater positives, whereas Demon's Souls' shortcomings just feel like the result of being the first Souls game. Flounders of the first steps, if you will. Wow, what a tagline! I should use that for the title of a video or something. So to start off with the story. Anyways, onto the gameplay. In all honesty, there's a lot of interesting lore here, but I am not qualified to tell you what's going on. You want that info, you know where to go. Basic rundown though, you are a knight or magician or whatever fantasy person you want to be, and you gotta go get those demon souls. Like in the name. Alrighty then, coming from dark to demons, I feel like the most impactful difference was the healing system. Now, as a certified gamer, it did solve a pretty big problem of mine. Not only does the game make me touch grass, it makes me eat it. On a serious note, FromSoft didn't come up with the Estus system until Dark Souls 1. This really smart healing system that refills every time you rest at a checkpoint and would define these games later on. Moongrass, on the other hand, is a finite resource that you collect throughout the world or buy, and serves as your primary means of healing. Finite as in, yes, it can run out, which also means, yeah, if you hit a wall and use a bunch of healing trying to get past it, which will probably happen because these games are notoriously not the easiest thing in the world, and then you end up running out of healing, you will be forced to work part-time in agricultural pursuits. It was actually my biggest fear when starting this game, but it's actually only really a problem like once or twice. You see, there's a few different types of like moongrass that heal different amounts of your health, so you end up prioritizing some moongrasses while letting others pile up. You may also stop running into walls or challenges that make you use a lot of healing, and the drop rates of grasses from enemies may start getting a little inconsistent. To make a long story short, eventually the opposite effect happens, where you are never running out of healing. It's an interesting effect because there is this level of excitement and strategy and learning that comes from managing your healing in the other games that just wasn't present in Demon's Souls. As long as you can find a safe window to heal, the learning and adapting strategy for these levels and bosses is a lot less tension filled. Finding the time to heal can still be a challenge, but shit, I just miss the Sunny D, man. I think their means of combating this was another system that also never leaves this game. Inventory space. You can't just carry around everything. Once your space reaches its limit, other stuff you get is sent to this guy, who just carries all your extras. To be honest, this is more of an unnecessary nuance than some big change to gameplay. Most of my inventory in the other games are just excess items anyways, but now if I want to switch it up, I gotta spend some time sorting through and organizing to make space for stuff. I'd say the only important effect of this change is the truly priceless bond you build with this man. Seriously, he's the only one here I care about. Other than him, Patches is kind of funny, but I don't like anyone here. They're all depressing. And what the hell does Umbasa mean? I generally consider this game to be the simplest Souls title. Pretty naturally at first. Actually, I was gonna call the video Demon Souls the simplest Souls, but once I came up with the Flounders the First Step thing in the script, I decided to change it. But running counter to that viewpoint, there are a few things that felt a little overcomplicated in the grand scheme of things. Inventory weight is one example of that, but I think the most telling one is the soul tendency mechanic. It basically works like a karma system. Doing good things like killing bosses and helping people out online leads to tendency towards white, which leads to pathways and opportunities to get items, while killing friendly NPCs and invading people online will lead it towards black, spawning in more enemies and making the game harder in general. Sometimes the tendencies have the opposite effect. Sometimes the tendencies affect character side quests. Sometimes you can't even control the world tendency because it's also linked to the collective online tendency. This shit is a muddled mess and I might not even be explaining it right. It's just the lack of transparency of how this stuff works that just makes me really dislike this system. These games are infamous for never really explaining anything. I think my earlier in-depth analysis of the story was pretty telling of that. But there's really no benefit to it with this. I'm the type of person who likes to check every nook and cranny of a level, so when I see an item off in the distance, I'm assuming the game's gonna let me get there somehow. So I run up and down and around this place looking for any possible solution until I cave in and look it up. And it turns out I can't even get there because I need a pure white world tendency, which I don't have, because even though I beat all the bosses, I died to Flame Lurker in human form too many times, so I need to pray to God that someone summons me to help them out, or I just have to do better next playthrough. I don't like the world tendency, or soul tendency. Actually, I don't care, man. Now I'm writing the script up to this point, and I gotta say, I don't like the direction it's been going in. I didn't even intend for it to be like this, but the video has been pretty negative so far, which is crazy because this is a GOAT game. So let's talk about the level design, which is much more different from any other game rather than just worse. It doesn't have sprawling levels that loop over themselves or interconnect with the other levels like the others do. Here, it is much more classic and traditional. The Nexus serves as your hub, your little safe space to upgrade your stuff and yourself and be sad. From there, you can access 5 different levels, each of them having about 2 or 3 of these big sections, with each of them being separated by boss fights, until you reach the final boss of the level and finish it. For how straightforward they are in comparison to the rest of the series, it's crazy that they exude the same brilliance in their aesthetic, and structure, and challenges and bullshit. That linear nature is actually much more appreciated in many cases. The bigger and grander these games get, the more wasted space there tends to be, the less my exploration feels rewarded, the higher frequency of places that just aren't fun. The focused design with these worlds ensure that everywhere I go feels purposeful, like the area is there for a good reason. Like every second I'm forced to torture myself in World 5 is meaningful and will eventually lead to something kinda fun. I don't get that feeling from Farron Keep or Black Gulch. My personal favorite is Section 3-1, the prison. It's simple but smart. Go through different floors of the prison and find keys that let you progress throughout the others, and find secrets and extras. It's really great. Yep. Okay, let's start bitching again. The checkpoints. Each game had a different approach to checkpoints. At their best, they were used pretty sparingly, and it was unlocking different shortcuts throughout the level that would mark your progress and create a sense of scale and coolness. At their worst, they were like 10 seconds from each other. The checkpoints here are called Archstones, and despite these sections of the levels being quite massive, you only get one at the start of the level and after being a boss, with shortcuts connecting an Archstone to a later part of the section or level being pretty rare. I can actually only think of one example, and it's still decently long. It's weird because the levels feel like they're designed to have shortcuts. There are even specific points that feel like they're one small step away from being a shortcut, and then they just say, no. This, mixed with the absence of the flask healing system, leaves a pretty big hole in the Souls gameplay formula. Well, actually, since this is the first game, it's not an exclusion more than it is like a necessary addition, you know? The loop of watching every step throughout a level, keeping track of the environment and what it might possibly hold in store, managing your resources, and then deciding which step during combat and exploration best suits your current condition. How each use of the flask increases the stakes in this constant gamble you're playing by moving forward. where you stand to gain progress, but dying not only loses that progress, but possibly your money and XP if you can't make it back without dying again. Without shortcuts to look forward to, and no concrete cap on the amount you're able to heal, there's a lot less risk and reward when progressing throughout a level, and less incentive to properly learn through contextual directions. That risk, reward, and incentive is still here, but those things I just mentioned did add a lot to them. All that said, I think the most endearing quality of this game is also maybe its biggest drawback for any Souls player coming in for the first time. That being that it doesn't feel like this game was meant to be hard. The challenges here feel like the most genuine and different from the entire series. Like, it's still hard, but like, look at Dark Souls 2 in comparison, putting a cavalcade of enemies in a room and saying, okay, good luck, buddy. Or Elden Ring, giving the bosses the most ridiculous movesets I've ever seen. Challenging but fair, head ass. Challenging but fair, my ass. This shit is stupid! Demon's Souls in comparison is much less bombastic. Enemies aren't doing anything too crazy, and no situation feels like it's meant to screw you over. Well, at least specifically. Everything you're up against is a specific test for something, and the test being sadistic was just a happy little accident. Your combat's at its most basic, but the base is still well made, and it's not missing anything vital to the enjoyment, so the challenge still maintains that satisfying feeling of triumph once you beat it. Though the one place this uniqueness and simplicity doesn't benefit the game is with its bosses. A lot of these fights are very experimental. They were trying out a lot of different approaches, with many of them just not working in the long run. Lots of very gimmicky fights that revolve around one idea, and once you figure out what that is, the fight is basically over. Even better fights of this game haven't aged the best, like coming off of Elden Ring, where shit like this is happening. Demon's Souls' biggest moments are kinda lukewarm. Now that might not be fair, since this is my first Souls game and the last one I'm playing, but I don't know, there just wasn't anything that made my jaw drop, or made me go 100% into my gamer mode, you know? Every other one of these games had something that invoked those feelings, regardless of their orders or how many times I ran through them. That's not to say the bosses here aren't noteworthy in any way. If I had to choose a favorite here, it'd probably be the Storm King. After getting non-stop assaulted by these assholes throughout the entirety of the 4th Arch Zone, nothing beat the catharsis of finally getting the Storm Ruler and super sword slashing their asses out of the air, and having the climactic final showdown with the one responsible for making them. Flamelurker is also another favorite. It's the only boss here that feels in line with the hyper-violent energy of the fights in later entries. I really appreciate the ideas behind Maiden Astraea and Old Hero. Those were just really cool fights. Fight Penetrator without the lock-on, it's the best way to.
Penetrator.
I keep forgetting the bosses in 5-1 and 5-2 exist. The False King is weird, because, like, he is way too dangerous to stick up close to in fight, but otherwise he likes to spam this massive AoE attack and dash moves that are a little bit too easy to bait and counterattack on. It's just not a very well balanced fight. I knew the gist of what to expect from the bosses here, but Dragon, god damn, that did not stop it from being a disappointment. Like, look at him, he's cool as shit! This is the most wasted potential in the series. And of course, shout out to the Man-Eaters. The community has a huge amount of respect for these two as the original gang boss, which is why I was so surprised to find out that this fight is actually horrible. Having some of my favorite boss features, like an AI that spams the same charge move over and over again, and then flies away every other second, and then gets stuck on the terrain, sometimes while doing the charge move, which ends up with him doing the funny little Ornstein thing, where they charge, stop, stutter, and then just teleport and hit you for no reason. Very fun 10 out of 10 game. And joking aside, I mean that last part. Because a lot of these fumbles or failures or whatever I call them are just really blueprints for better systems in these later games. Some of them just needed more strings attached to them, like the healing or the boss design. The foundations were still built and present here, where other things needed to be simplified, like inventory or soul tendency or the weapon upgrade system. No, shit, I didn't even talk about the weapon upgrade system. Just look at the amount of stones on this picture here, that pretty much sums it up. None of these feel like bad choices or really go out to diminish the quality of the game. In a sense, it really feels like the most natural, genuine, and endearing. Again, the objective wasn't to make something difficult here. That's just the way this experience was best balanced. At the end of the day, I am so glad I got to play this game on the new, expensive, gigantic, book-looking ass PS5. I'm probably gonna play it again soon enough. And never mind, I take back what I said. I love you, Dark Souls 2. You are my personal favorite, but you are easily the worst one. Okay, bye.